Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chat, believing in my own will. Rap fire, math evil, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, setting ready for that ghost kill.
And then switching gears here, let's get into our first blue pill story of the day. And this is going to be talking about the Liberal and NDP merger coalition, or just a little backdoor agreement to prop up the Liberal government until 2025. But before we even look at the facts about this agreement that the NDP's made with the Liberals, let's look at this tweet from Jagmeet Singh that literally came out, let me do my math here, less than 3 days ago. The system has been rigged by Liberals and Conservatives to protect the rich and powerful. What if instead of gas prices going up, big oil made less money? What if we had a government with the courage to tax the rich and help Canadians who need it the most? That's what I'm fighting for. So do I understand this correctly, Jagmeet, that either within the last 3 days, the corruption that was rigged by the Liberals and Conservatives, the Liberals decided to no longer participate, and that's why you're now going to back them? Because I guess I'd be surprised that Trudeau moved that fast for anything other than the opportunity to, dress in blackface. So again, it's really hard to understand the messaging here, because I can't imagine that this proposal or this agreement, this coalition, was put together in under 3 days. So again, I just, I guess I'm going to take maybe a contrarian view here to the NDP Liberal merger. I actually think this is overall a good thing, straight up. I debated with myself where to slot it in tonight's course of pills. I actually think it's just a blue pill story because I think it actually accomplishes a lot of things here. One, for people of a similar mindset to myself, it's like, okay, you know what? We see exactly what pieces are on the chessboard now. I understand we're absolutely going to a new world order. We are absolutely going to own nothing by the year 2030, and they will demand that we like it. Maybe that's a little bit hyperbolic, but I don't think it's really that much at this point in time. Secondly, I think that this is the kiss of death for Jagmeet as well as likely the NDP party. Becoming backbenchers of the Liberal Party, I can't imagine that that's what a lot of NDP voters were voting for in this most recent election. I also think that this actually isn't good for the Conservative Party either. But I think it's hopefully very good for parties like Max Bernier's PPC. Right. I think that we're going to see so many boondoggles. We're going to see so many scandals over the coming months and years until 2025 that I think we're going to see a lot more freedom oriented, libertarian oriented, fiscally conservative individuals be radicalized. This is the mainstream media's words here, but be radicalized into the PPC party and start supporting Max. I think it's a net benefit. Let's actually just start preparing our arcs here. Let's start looking for alternative options, whether that's buying your own citadel and moving off grid or disconnecting from the mainstream, whether it's getting the hell out of Canada. I don't blame you at this point either. But I actually, overall, I don't think this is a bad thing. I think it's actually better because it's going to reduce the amount of false hopes we have over the coming months and years. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on all this. But first, let's dive into some of the facts before I move on. So this is from Reuters. Factbox, details of Canada's PM Trudeau's deal with NDP to keep power until 2025. And so there actually is a lot to parse out here. So healthcare, and this was released by both parties. They published a list of priorities. Healthcare plan to launch a new dental care program for low-income Canadians starting with under 12-year-olds in 2022. They expand to under 18-year-olds, senior, and people living with a disability in 2023 before a full implementation by 2025. In theory, this sounds good. Let's just get some more free benefits, right, as being a Canadian. But just think about what problems has the government solved recently and how effective and efficient were they? Because honestly, when I try and draw out a list of things that the government's effective and efficient at implementing, particularly the Canadian government, I guess right now my page is blank. Secondly, work towards a universal national prescription drug coverage plan by passing a Canada Pharmacare Act by the end of 2023. Task the National Drug Agency to develop a national list of essential medications and bulk purchasing plan by the end of the agreement. Again, in theory, this sounds good. Pharmaceutical drugs are too expensive, in my opinion. That's coming from a former financial controller of a publicly traded pharmaceutical company that was based out of Canada. However, this isn't the way. this isn't actually going to solve any of these problems. Maybe I'm just too black-pilled on this, but I really do believe that all this is going to do is make it easier for drug companies to prop up their profit margins. I think that if we were really serious about trying to get healthcare costs in line and pharmacare costs in line, we would actually look at challenging some of our complex and Byzantine structures around intellectual property rights, right? Around the ability for these corporations to essentially to copyright different genetic sequencing and understand, like right now, there's drugs that are what's it called? Like not off-label, but essentially like no-name drugs that aren't made by the big corporations, like in India, right? India, you'll find that a lot of drugs actually become no longer protected or like no longer under copyright earlier in India. So, look at a drug like Humira, one of the most expensive drugs. I believe it's the most profitable drug for AbbVie with the highest margin. Well, there's a competitor made by an Indian firm that rolled out in 2018. But here in the West, I forget if it's rolled out now or it rolls out in a couple of years from now. But understand that it's actually the rules and regulations the government set in place that has allowed these corporations and pharmaceutical companies to create the monopolies they have. And I don't think creating more red tape is going to solve this. And in fact, if I want to be black-pilled on this, I would say that they're going to, in theory, create these benefits for us and then demand we comply to more of their requirements. So it could be things like you need a digital ID in order to participate in these programs. It could be things like you need to be vaccinated up to whatever our current definition of full vaccination is at the moment in time if you want to receive these goods and services from the government. So again, whenever someone says they're from the government and they're going to solve my problems, one, I want to immediately protect my pocketbook, and two, I want to look for the exits because I know that a clusterfuck is about to go down. Next was lowering housing costs. Again, understand every political party here ran on different platforms saying they were going to fix the housing crisis. Nothing's happened. In fact, housing just keeps going radically up. A few of the campaign promises the Trudeau Liberals made, they've already had the opportunity to implement, and they chose not to. Now, again, I don't think that those would have actually solved our housing crisis here, but at least they would be giving lip service to their own campaign promises, which I guess I would appreciate. Again, at least look us in the eyes when you're fucking us. Implement a home buyer's bill of rights, which would make home buying more transparent and tackle the financialization of the housing market by the end of 2023. Again, a home buyer's bill of rights, this is just going to create more bureaucracy, more red tape. I can imagine, a decade or two from now, you'll have to go before a housing board and make your case for where you land on the victim hierarchy in regards to what your, ESG score is going to be. And that'll determine whether you're able to rent that apartment or buy that apartment, or whether you need to, go into the slums. Again, government's not going to fix this. And the way we can tell government's not actually interested in fixing the housing crisis here is they're not actually looking at financial policies, right? They're not actually looking at deficit spending. They're not looking at printing press goes burr. Until we fix the money, this is all just lip service. This is all just a shell game of just trying to kick the can down the road so someone else gets blamed for it. And as long as it's not you and your political party, what's it matter, right? Next, on climate, advanced measures to achieve significant emissions reductions by 2030 compared to 2005 levels, accelerate the trajectory to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. This is just not going to happen, but it will have a severe impact to our economy here in Canada. And there is consequences to these policies. And a lot of these consequences are unintended. Next was, and I'm just kind of highlighting a handful here, reconciliation, make significant, in quotes, whatever that means, investments in housing for Indigenous people in 2022. So I guess the government that can't get clean drinking water to all the First Nations reserves is somehow magically going to solve their housing crisis through significant investment. I mean, call me crazy, but why don't you fix the water if you can fix shit, Mr. Government? Tax system, change how financial institutions that have made strong profits during the COVID-19 pandemic are taxed. Yeah, that's really going to play out well. I don't believe it. And again, taxation isn't the issue here, right? It's the policies that allowed large corporations and financial institutions to dominate the Canadian economy that got us into this point in time. It's just like you're literally just taking money from one pocket, putting it in the other here without actually trying. Like, this is treating symptoms rather than treating the underlying cause, right? You're not actually trying to prevent anything here. You're just trying to make yourself look good for voters. And honestly, I feel like at this point in time, the reason that we find ourselves with this agreement or coalition government is because I think Justin Trudeau wants to have something he can put his name or legacy to before he exits, right? And right now, he couldn't exit politics unless it was in disgrace. And Jagmeet, I think Jagmeet just wants to make sure he gets his pension and some of his NDP cronies get their pensions because, they love their pensions. And they know that they don't actually have the teeth to try and separate themselves from the Trudeau Liberals, the same way that, honestly, it seems like most mainstream conservatives don't have the teeth or the guts to try and separate themselves from the pack. And so what ends up happening is we're left with liberal extreme, which is the NDP, liberal, and then liberal light, which is the conservatives. So again, I think this is actually going to probably play out in Trudeau and the Liberals' favor, but I hope it plays out in Max's and PPC's favor even more. Then voting, they're going to work with Elections Canada to explore ways to expand the ability for people to vote through an expanded election day or 3 days of voting, allowing people to vote at any polling place within their electoral district and improving the process of mail-in ballots. We already covered it where there was thousands of mail-in ballots that ended up not being counted, that were delayed or whatever. Over 100,000 were sent out that weren't returned. Now, that doesn't mean that there was definitively shenanigans in our elections. But again, I guess the biggest question here is on the voting thing, in my opinion. Are you actually solving a real problem? And I don't think that you're solving a real problem. I don't think that the vast majority of Canadians didn't have the opportunity to go out and vote, right? In fact, if anything, I think had you made your policies more open and inclusive, right? Like not mandatory masks, not playing through the social distancing facade and all that, I think you would have actually even made it a smoother process for people that want to go vote. Now, at the same time, to me, voting is just a giant waste of time. We've kind of discussed this a few times in the past. I only voted once when I was 18. Glad that I got checked that off my bucket list, but after that, I realized it's mainly pointless. And understand that culture is always upstream of politics. So again, if we really want to change things, we actually need to focus on changing the culture first. From CBC News, they did an article here just highlighting different conservative pundits and the interim leader and their positions in regards to framing the Liberals' power grab after Trudeau made the deal with the NDP. So if you're interested in going down that rabbit hole, I encourage you to do so. I don't think there's anything jarring here or that really stands out in my opinion. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. Then from the National Post, radical left liberal NDP deal reeks of opportunism, Democratic backsliding on the genteel kind. I don't disagree with Rupa here. For the last couple of years, living under a range of restrictions and limitations to individual liberty under the pandemic, many Canadians have had an inchoate sense, I'm not even sure what that word means, I'm going to need a thesaurus, but sense of a country in the state of drift, without a real sense of accountability for decisions made by politicians, whether federal or provincial, that profoundly affect people's lives and liberty, but against which there appears to be little or no recourse. Last fall's federal election didn't change anything. It gave us a repetition of the previous election, a parliament with a governing party that once again lost the popular vote, yet managed to rule with apparent great authority with a minority of seats. The Proof Strategies Can Trust Index, an annual survey of trust, found a 10% drop in trust in government between January 2021 and January 2022. And obviously, that was actually before even the Freedom Convoy broke out in February. So the reason I just kind of wanted to highlight this is, I agree. I think that Canadians are just going to see this as more politicking, more focused on politicians, making sure they cover their ass, that they build themselves a legacy, and not really caring about what the voters want or what the voters wish to see accomplished through their government. Again, I could take this in a black pill direction, but I think it's probably a net benefit because it's just going to kill a lot of false hopes that I saw people floating around. Kinsella breaking down motive for this undemocratic liberal NDP backroom deal. I just like the title or the subtitle here. They've got an axis of weasels, dirty deals gives Trudeau lots of runway to cobble together some sort of legacy achievement. And yeah, I really do think that that's the goal here from Trudeau's perspective is he doesn't want to be the honk prime minister. He wants to be a hero. I think that's why we see the grandstanding and the photo ops in regards to Ukraine right now. I think that that's why we see this coalition government. So, Kinsella makes some good points here about how backroom deals, regardless of their intentions or goals, it always looks shady and it's always going to feel sneaky and undemocratic. I agree with that. And he just comments here briefly about how we can forget about NDP leader Jagmeet Singh because he's now officially and deservedly forgettable and irrelevant. Yeah, I pretty much agree. Again, anything they accomplish here will be pinned to Trudeau's lapel rather than to Jagmeet, in my opinion. Then Kinsella here breaks down 4 theories on why they decided to potentially do this, or why Trudeau and his government would decide to do this. The first one I completely disagree with here. I know that there is some polling that says that Jean Charest is apparently the best option for Conservatives to take back power. I don't believe it. Straight up. Don't believe you. Don't believe those pollsters. Maybe this is me being anti-facts or emotional, but I actually think Pierre Poilievre would get a lot more of the PPC vote, and that would be enough to potentially tip the Conservatives over. As well, I would have originally expected the NDP to get more votes as well. I think, if anything, the reason here is just to make the NDP party a completely lame duck for the next election. I think that serves the Liberals well. The second theory he has here is that the PMO staff was bored. I don't know if that was meant to be a joke or not, but I don't see why that would be the case for this agreement. The third one was measures. So Trudeau and Singh are planning something really, really big policy-wise. It may not be nationalizing banks or pharmaceutical companies, but one can be reasonably certain that it will be big lefty, dental care, more pharma care, more everything care, cradle to grave stuff, print more money, etc. Yeah. And again, the only reason I think he would choose to do that is honestly, he being Trudeau here, would be to have that legacy project. And then the fourth one he highlights here is a legacy project and positioning the Liberals to be in a better position in 2025. And unfortunately, I think he's right to a decent extent. I think that if the Liberals don't completely screw things up, and if the Conservatives decide to continue to be liberal light, again, outside of that chance of it radicalizing a lot of Conservatives and old school Liberals to start looking at the PPC party, I do think that it could give Trudeau's legacy a boost, as well as allow whoever comes in after Trudeau, whoever she may be, the opportunity to potentially become prime minister. One thing that I did want to highlight here, because whenever I can bring up the scandals of the Trudeau government, you guys know I'm going to take my shot. His only legacy to date, this is Trudeau, is the SNC-Lavalin scandal, the Aga Khan scandal, and the WE scandal. And lots of missteps and malproposals that caused us, people kind, to wince. Yep, I agree with that.